So what do you do? What are your options? What route do you take? Do I take? What do we do? Do we go gay? Do we become a woman? Or what I think a lot of dudes are doing is they're disappearing into the ether. And I mean this quite literally. And look, we could dive into why that's happening and I want to get into that, but let's just be clear on this is that the great feminization, more than anything else, is class warfare. For sure. It's a bioweapon, if you will, used to stifle progress, to blunt your edge, to bevel your aggression, to hormonally, spiritually cuck you out. And look, and this is what happens to the dudes that do disappear into the ether. If you're one of these guys, I think there's still a little bit of hope for you, a glimmer, if anything, right? But it's these guys that are essentially scrolling endlessly on their phone, getting high for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, eating all the sloppy seed oil laden foods there are out there because there's tons of them, and just getting that cheap dopamine and resetting every day and living vicariously through the things that they see. And if that is you, I'm sorry, because there's something better for you out there that is a miserable life and it will yield nothing but misery in the long term and in the interim even. And I've been there. So look, I'm not over here trying to pretend like I don't know what it's like. I know exactly what it's like, and it's horrible and embarrassing to even think that I was even at a point like that at one point. But I was, in fact. And I was bred to be dependent, to be just a weak man. I was bred to be that way, not intentionally, but just through through birth, through spoilage, through the easing of life. Living in America and living in a family that wants to do everything for you. So it wasn't from a bad place. But anyhow, so lest we forget what this great feminization means is what it means. I'm trying to just recap all the different instances that I've come up against it and not realizing what it was. I just thought, look, this is the nature of the game. The affairs are what they are. But, you know, the first sort of instance where I sort of came up against it and not even realizing at the time was at university, right? Liberal arts institutions, California state universities where you get pillaged, right? You get indoctrinated to think a certain way. And that is the feminine imperative, right? Is to problematize and empathize and create sort of like a therapy talk session about everything, and to look at everything as white men is their fault. That they've created sort of the system. It's very cookie cutter and it's very easy to follow. And I can see how palatable it is for the hindbrain, for the simple minded, for the pleb, for those people. I can see it, and unfortunately, a lot of people that go to university are not very intelligent. In fact, I venture to say that people that don't go to university are probably more intelligent because you have to do more. It's a lot harder, right? There isn't a single path, right? As opposed to you go to university and it's like plug and chuck. They give you a certain set of classes, you figure it out, and then you go from there and you find a job, and then you cuck yourself out in that regard as well. And then the other thing is too, okay, so fine, you get out of uni, you survive as a man, you make it out, you're fully liberal, you got blue hair, you might be bisexual, you love to placate, right? You love to capitulate, you love to kind of fit in, and because it makes sense, right? As a young guy, you're still vulnerable, you're trying to figure out your identity, you don't know who you are, and so what ends up happening is, and you're trying to, get a chick, lay the pipe, get some pussy, like whatever it is that you're trying to do. And these psychosexual strategies that come out of that are that you kind of, okay, you're okay with dating a hoe. You're okay with overlooking a whore's past or even present, if that, right? And you're okay with maybe the fact that she might be with other guys. But where does that come from? That comes from that grinder mindset, right? The gay application to a heterosexual life, which is that, who cares if they're hooking up with other people? You're trying to do the same. And you'll take whatever it comes with it because you just want to get in and get out. You want to dive in head first, get wet, and then find something else to do. And then you keep rinse and repeat, and then you find more avenues to continue doing that loop and that cycle and finding yourself mired in that. But there's that part, right? And then the other part is when you finally do get a position, right? You're a salary man, right? You're in the longhouse, is that you get beaten down into submission. The amount of times I've gone to HR over women is absurd. And people will say, well, why don't you take accountability for your actions? Maybe it's you. And sure, of course, absolutely, it is me. But what is it? It's the language, it's the tone, it's the things that I say, it's the way that I say it, and that becomes the problem. It's not, in fact, the content of what I said. It's the way that, in the manner in which I've expressed myself, that becomes the problem. And then I'm thinking to myself, okay, here we go again with these like Muslim, misogynistic tropes, right? You see a bearded gentleman, handsome, in fact, funny, interesting, eccentric, definitely a loner, definitely a weirdo, right? Whatever you want to categorize me as such. And I get in trouble and punished for it. And then I think to myself, what's the industry I'm in, right? I'm surrounded by women, and not women that you want to be around. Very unpleasant to be around, in fact. And having to deal with HR, right? HR is a female imperative industry, right? It makes no sense in the real world because and men weaponize it. They weaponize the whole idea of HR as well. I've said a lot of things out loud and have gotten in trouble by men as well. So they use it in the same manner. They use it in the same manner. Okay, so there's that part. And so the thing is, pre HR world is that if I had an issue with the dude, I'd duke it out with him in the parking lot. And that's just how we would do it. Or, it doesn't necessarily have to be violent. I would have just confronted them like a human being and said, hey, why are you saying the things you're saying? But you can't even do that anymore. You confront a guy, forget about a girl, you confront a guy with that. And for sure, you're going to be in the office the next morning talking about you made him feel threatened, you provoked, you confronted, you bullied, you submitted, you bullied them into submission, right? And so that becomes an issue as well. And that, like I said, this is all part of that same zeitgeist, that sort of feminization of the mindset. It's everywhere, right? It's economic, it's cultural, institutional. It's weaved into the very fabric of everything, especially in the way that we sort of conduct ourselves. And it's a program where it's like you either get in line or you get shipped out. And like I said, the alternatives are bleak. Sure, there's a lot of dudes that can stand out, but we're not all Joe Rogan, right? We can't all just create a mothership out of nowhere and just start getting high and talk all the shit we want. We can, but the reality is, for a lot of dudes, let's be honest, is that there's consequences to speaking out, right? Whether financial or otherwise. But for me, I've been castigated, right? Like I'm on the no-fly list. I'm blacklisted, if you will, from a lot of circles at work, which it's par for the course. Like if anything, I would be concerned if I was still invited to some of these events, and I wear that gleefully because I think to myself, yeah, I would never want to be around these types of people, these deadbeats, these degenerates, these disgusting types, and and maybe I'm the problem, but so be it. But that's the thing, is like, as a guy, you have to really think to yourself, like, this is a lonely path, and especially in these conditions. And I guess the question becomes like, will there ever be a turnaround? Will there ever be a shift? Will there be a reaction from dudes? Will they be like, enough is enough, bring back the patriarchy, you know, the femcentricity is over, it's a wrap? I just find it hard to believe because I look around me and I talk to guys, and some guys are cool, they're quote unquote based, if you will, but most dudes are not. Most dudes are dangerous, if not, you know, if not anything else, or just kind of fade into the background. They don't give me the hope that there's enough of a pushback culturally that things may change. And maybe I'm too wishful. But the reality is, like, this is what we're contending with. These are the circumstances that we're in. And what do? You go your way? Yeah, you could. I could. We all could. We could go our own way and kind of forge our own path outside of sort of official sort of circles, right? HR protocol, non-HR protocol. And that really does look like the only viable option right now, besides just becoming a man not in the labor force and just mooching off of Section 8 and food stamps and being one of those losers that's just smoking weed all day. Because there's plenty of those. I see them everywhere. And it's just not a good situation. These are just like, queens of the city. And yeah, I mean, it's just something that I've been studying, I've been looking at lately, and I've just been very concerned that I don't know if the tide will turn, at least not in my surroundings. I don't see it. But I guess the message for you is that if you're surrounded by it, that you can at least self-correct and and make a change for yourself at the very least. And if everybody around you wants to punish you for it, then so be it. That's sort of the consequence of being a man. And especially in this environment where everything is hyper feminized, especially economically, I just see it so much, and it's just like I'm disgusted by it. And I'm just trying to find a way. I'm trying to find a way. I'm I'm trying to ignore it. I'm trying to pretend like it won't have an effect, but that remains to be seen. But anyhow, I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.